This is a little bit different tonight because I'm going to be sharing with you more about my story and why nervous system work has never been simply a strategy in my case. So, this is my time to just really be vulnerable, be open with you, share with you more of my story so that you can get a little bit of insight into how this all came to be around what I'm teaching on, and also to have this sense of understanding around why I'm so passionate about the 4 pillars that I teach on. Because for me, they're not just pillars, they're actually real transitional points in my life for a journey that I went through. And this is why this work means so much to me. So I've shared a lot of tools, I've shared a lot of practices over the month of July and a lot of teachings, but I really want to share more of me with you tonight for this last video of July. So today I really want to share my story around what my story is behind the work that I've been doing, and the real reason why nervous system healing isn't just something that I teach, but it's something that I really live and have lived through for a very long time. So let's go back to a really young version of me. I want to go through just to give you a little bit of a landscape. So growing up, we all have our own childhood stuff. I'm not going to dive into all the details, but there was a lot of intensity in the environment that I was growing up in. And I remember that even from a really young age, like age 8, I would run as a way to really try and calm myself. I didn't understand what I was doing, but I had this like excess pent up energy that I felt like I needed to like get out of my body. And so I remember from a really young age, my grandma would drive beside me and I would run. And it, thinking back, I think how lovely of her that she was willing to get in the car and to just drive until I would have enough ultimately. And then she'd be sweet enough to then open up the car door, let me in, and then we would drive back home. And this is really important because that's like understanding that the body is always sending signals to us. It's always trying to speak to us and tell us like what is going on, what gets to be released. I didn't understand how to release emotions when I was 8. It wasn't a concept. After numbing out and disconnecting for already years before that, I wouldn't have been able to put words to it. So moving the body has always been something that I have found incredibly powerful, incredibly helpful to really come back into my body and to feel safe again in my body. So really understanding the importance of that. And one pillar builds from the next, because just doing the physical wasn't like that was enough to really resolve everything within my system. It wasn't. And at 14, I got shingles and I was bedbound for a few weeks in the sanatorium in my boarding school. And again, I've shared with this. If anyone had asked me at the time, like, Simone, how are you? I would have said, I'm fine. I'm fine. I'm absolutely fine. There was a level that things had escalated to where I was so disconnected, so emotionally shut down. I didn't have any awareness of what was going on in my body. You know, from age 8 to 14, that's quite a big span. So there was clearly a big disconnect, a big shut off and shut down, where I wasn't even aware of the emotions that were actually going on underneath. And so, of course, my body gave me that gift of fully shutting down and making me stop ultimately in every area that I was trying to distract myself in by making me bedbound. And this is something that continued on. So even though I had then done talk therapy from the age of 14 every single week up until the age of 18, which was when I left, I continued to experience burnout cycles. I continued to experience feeling really numbed out and just very disconnected within myself. I had all these stories around what I thought the feminine was, and I had these ideas around wanting to be this strong, independent woman, which I know so many of you women can relate to because I've spoken to you and I know you felt that same way too. And in that, needing to be this strong, independent woman became this almost, I mean, obsession for control, right? Everything needed to be within my control. And this looked like really holding on tightly to everything, feeling like I needed to perform the whole time. I was definitely in that good girl archetype, people pleasing, really not centered in who I was or knowing who I was or even knowing what I wanted. This disconnect from my body and from my emotions meant it was really hard to try and navigate that and to find my way through that because I didn't have this connection point, this anchoring. And so there were many different things that I went through. And I remember I had always trained. So from the age of 14, by the time I was allowed in the gym, I was in the gym every day. And I remember that I was, doing all the things that I thought were healthy. And then around the age of around 23, 24, I started to have some real health problems where I was continually going in for tests and they didn't understand what was going on. And ultimately, I remember being told, well, we think you may have stomach cancer, but we don't know. And we feel like you may never be able to have children. And I was around 23, 24. I can't exactly put my finger on that date. But that was the initiation into me really exploring how I fueled my body. And that really set me on this path of I am going to go so deep into this. I'm not accepting that for myself. I'm going to do whatever it takes to make that not my reality. And so I remember going to all the seminars, like Tony Robbins when I was about 23, 24, all these big seminars around the mindset work. And I read all these books and I remember looking into all these different ways of fasting and eating and moving and breath work and everything, because I was so shaken by what I had just been told, thinking that I was healthy, right? But not having that awareness around how emotions are stored within the body and how the body can then bring things to the surface. And I'm sharing my story not from a place of not giving you advice. I'm simply sharing this was my journey. This is what has led me to really grounding into these 4 pillars, because these pillars for me have been absolutely lived. So that was that second initiation into, there is a different way that I get to be eating to really support myself in this season of life. And I continued to do so much in terms of taking in wisdom, taking in knowledge, really wide open, thirsty, wanting to really kind of get to the bottom of everything. As I said, I had done talk therapy for multiple years. I had seen psychiatrists. I had, been moving my body in a way to help support me with processing emotions on that physical level. And then really getting to this point when I was around 27, where I was at this point where I thought that I had created everything that I wanted. And yet I still felt really disconnected, really numbed out. And I just felt numb. I felt numb. And on top of that, I was getting ill every single month. I was getting burnt out. My body was shutting down every single month. And then I was what am I not understanding, right? what am I not seeing? Because I'd felt like I'd done so many years of work and so much exploration, doing multiple diplomas, multiple courses, like everything that I've ever learned is because I knew that I needed that for myself first. So at 27, I began on the journey of doing my first ever ayahuasca journey. And I was absolutely petrified because this is someone who was really wanting to stay in control. And I knew that that was not going to happen in this journey. And that was such a huge initiation. And I'd never done anything like that before because I'd always been like, I'd always wanted to be in control, that I'd never done anything that would mean that I would not be in control. And it really, really cracked me open on so many levels. And I'm not going to share those stories here. But it was ultimately witnessing how I had been trying to control everything, and ultimately that I wasn't feeling safe in my body. And I remember feeling so much sensation in my body that I had never felt before. And there are so many levels to that journey. I'm not going to go into it, but that was a huge second part of the initiation, which was really around reconnecting with my body, reconnecting with the emotions, feeling safe within my body to actually feel sensation, feel emotions, process emotions, and not feel like I had to like hold it all in and shut it all down and keep swallowing everything. And I had been in such a place where it was creating this disconnect and this tension in my relationship. My partner and I have been together for over 11 years now. So he's been on the journey with me. And there was even so much control and fear around when he shared with me that he was ready to go home, and home was New Zealand and we were in London. But what led to this real beginning of the journey of reclaiming the feminine, reclaiming that deep nourishment and nervous system work began when I left and I was more in contact with nature. And yes, there were these pendulum swings from being like hyper vigilant, always on guard, feeling like I was always on edge, fully disconnected, to then like being in nature, living on tribal land, living really simply, getting in tune with my own cycle, allowing my own rhythm to come back, and finding this middle ground, because that's what I'm really passionate about. Is it's not about just throwing away everything or leaving the life that you've created and hiding away somewhere. No, it's about really recentering, regrounding into your center. And so during that time, there was a lot of shifts and shedding around identity, which is why I teach on identity so much as well, because I had to shift and shed the identity that I had for myself around this strong, independent woman heading up this, wellness space, doing all the things in fitness and in that wellness space I'd always wanted to do, but in a very hyper masculine way, and in a way that I was actually, really ironically, incredibly disconnected from myself, where everything had to be perfect and poised and buttoned up and presented in a certain way. And yet there was no connection with my own emotion. And then going into the other direction where it was total surrender, going into the unknown, living close to nature, understanding the rhythms, connecting with my feminine energy, and ultimately going on this path of really reconnecting with feeling safe to feel and to process and to express all emotions without any judgment. And over this past 2 years, it's been this real reclamation of the full spectrum of emotions. So for the last 2 years, I've really been journeying with the Priestess and going into year-long training for Priestess facilitation training ultimately. And there were a lot of stories that I got to unpack around my perception of the feminine, or my perception of certain emotions like anger and rage, and really finding that aliveness that comes when we are able to just be raw with ourselves and real with ourselves. And the somatic work has really come from that, along with a year-long facilitation training that I'm doing in breathwork. Even though I had done a lot of breathwork training and hypnosis and NLP in the past, there is something really potent about being in a year-long training that I cannot convey to you. And that is like the settling in to, again, a new identity and a new expanded level of capacity, a new level of embodiment, because it's simply part of my day-to-day. And so this is why I'm so passionate about teaching those 4 pillars: the physical, the nourishment not just in terms of food, but actually like really nourishing you as a whole being. And that identity piece around allowing that shedding and that rebirth to take place, and also getting clear on the identity of who you actually desire to become, not just accepting, oh, well, this was my background, this was how I grew up, so I'm just going to accept this. No, like we get to shift that around perceptions around what you perceive as being worthy or not worthy of. That all stems back into identity and capacity to hold, capacity to be present, capacity to be with the full spectrum of who you are, so that you feel so unshakable within yourself. That capacity piece is everything. And that is really all about that somatic work, expanding your capacity. So if you have been on a journey where you've been silently surviving in a body that actually feels like it's not you, like you feel disconnected from it, or you feel constantly exhausted, I want you to know I see you and I feel you, because I've really walked this path for so many years. And this is ultimately about coming home. It's about coming home to yourself, and it's about being held and feeling safe to also be held. And it's about creating a life where you no longer abandon yourself. And if I can leave you with one wish, like that is it. My wish is that you find yourself back home within yourself, and that you no longer abandon yourself in any shape or form. And that is where I would love to leave this episode at. If you feel really called to share your story, what your journey has been, where you're at on your journey, I would love to hear. Please send me a DM on my Instagram, SimoneWhiteman.co, and I would love to hear what resonated with you, what landed with you in this journey, in this share. I'm sending you so much love. And I will be doing weekly YouTube videos in the month of August and moving forward. So I will be back soon. Have a beautiful weekend. Bye.